If there's one thing I've always feared since I started riding motorcycles, that thing is the tank slapper. Tank slapper, speed wobble, death wobble, call it what you want. Today I'll explain why you should fear it too and why it can be extremely dangerous for us motorcyclists. Let's start with the basics. What is a tank slapper? Well, let me show you some examples. What you've seen are extremely severe tank slappers where we've seen different outcomes, miraculous saves or disastrous crashes that damage the bike and especially ourselves when we're thrown onto the asphalt. Because basically the result of a serious tank slapper is an high side. And an high side is the type of motorcycle crash that hurts the most. That said, what is a tank slapper? You saw it in the example videos. While we're riding, the steering slowly starts to move, then instead of stopping, this movement becomes more and more pronounced with the front tire no longer able to stay aligned, while the rear one, obviously not having handlebars, stays aligned. So this confusion is created, right? Between the rear wheel wanting to go straight and the front one not knowing what to do, whether to veer left or veer right. And we're sitting on top while the bike feels like a wild horse. Now what can cause a tank slapper? Well, there are many factors. Obviously they're mostly related to the front of the bike where we have several components. The first one is the tires. Very often a bike can wobble simply after a tire change because it might have a tire with a different profile from then on, and that different profile, maybe pointier, tends to have less contact with the asphalt. But a tank slapper can also occur due to incorrect tire pressures. Another reason a tank slapper can happen is a bent rim, maybe after a crash or hitting a particularly deep pothole. The rim got warped and so the front wheel is no longer aligned. Or there could be a problem with the fork, maybe one of the tubes is bent or both, or a fork that's no longer working hydraulically can cause these kinds of problems. It's less likely that wobbling issues come from the rear of the bike, but even a rear shock that isn't working well can cause this type of problem. So to avoid a tank slapper, the first thing to do is definitely maintain your bike well. Nothing extreme, just regular maintenance. Another typical case where a tank slapper can occur, whether we like it or not, is following sudden acceleration. Who doesn't like to accelerate on their bike? Everyone does. And maybe bikes like the 09 also have, that tendency to wheelie, which doesn't help in terms of tank slappers. Because there the front end actually lifts up. It's not even a matter of losing grip anymore. And maybe when it comes back into contact with the asphalt, it lifts up while straight. Then when it touches the asphalt again, it hits like this. And so immediately after it tries to realign itself, but it goes all the way to the right. And that's where the head shake starts. So even having a riding style that's too aggressive on the throttle can cause you some problems. But then there's clearly a whole other chapter, which is the one determined by the characteristics of the vehicle. For example, the MT-09 isn't the most stable bike at the front end that we can remember because it actually has a front end that's not very communicative compared to other bikes similar to it, even compared to other naked bikes. Already, the 2021, 2022, 2023 models have solved this problem a bit because by shortening the fork, even though they put very high risers to keep the MT position, at least when you're in the saddle you have a lot more control over the front end, so you feel it better. For example, the old model, one of the things I never liked about the old model was precisely that it had a very long fork, almost like a touring bike, and because of that head shakes were really much more common than they are on the new model. But for example, an enduro bike suffers from this problem. Take the Tenere 700 World Raid. In fact, they put a steering damper on it, which was probably needed. For example, a bike that doesn't suffer from this problem is a sport bike. The sport bike has an extremely short fork, but there's also something else to be said. When a sport bike can no longer manage AA head shake, well, head shakes on sport bikes, look at this video, they are tough to control. On naked bikes, on touring bikes, on enduros, head shakes are more frequent, but they're generally easier to control. But now that we know what the characteristics of a bike are that most frequently lead to a head shake and what maintenance helps us prevent it from happening, let's see how to deal with a head shake, because sometimes it doesn't matter about the maintenance, the riding style, or the type of bike you have, a head shake can happen to you. For example, a very common thing is hitting a pothole at high speed, the front end loses contact with the asphalt and starts to oscillate. At high speed, the oscillation becomes more and more pronounced. We're on our nice bike that starts to wobble. At first the head shake will be weak, then it will get stronger and stronger until it becomes a real tank slapper, which is when the handlebars hit the steering stops. And at that point the situation is already definitively compromised because then 9 times out of 10 you end up falling. So when we feel the bike starting to have this kind of movement, what we absolutely must not do is stiffen up. Very often, what do beginners do? When they feel a little bit of a shake at the front end, they tend to stiffen up to immediately compensate for the movement and bring the handlebars back into alignment. This is the most wrong thing you can do, because by doing so, not only will the handlebars be subjected to the force of the front wheel trying to find its axis again, but there will also be your auxiliary forces on the handlebars which won't help, because the front wheel is already struggling there trying to regain some stability. If you then add your own movement with your hands on the handlebars, well, the bike won't really be able to stabilize itself. Therefore, as many people advise, what you should try to do is let the head shake just run its course. This is actually the best option. So you simply feel that the handlebars are moving, don't do anything. Keep a firm grip on the handlebars, but don't apply any force. So grip the handles tightly, but don't try to compensate for the movement. It's a situation you can't get out of, and it worsens the head shake, turning it into a real tank slapper that you almost never recover from on two wheels. So let the handlebars run their course and eventually decelerate or accelerate depending on the situation. If it's a small head shake, it might be easier to get out of it just by giving it a little gas. If the head shake is already significant, I advise you to close the throttle to help stabilize the front end. And to conclude, I'll take you on the bike with me now. I'll show you an example of a head shake that I'll clearly generate myself, because you never expect a real one. So we can also see how to handle it directly in the first person. Guys, when you're in the city, leather jackets and Cordura jackets are really uncomfortable and not very stylish. So having equally protective clothing like these jeans and this leather jacket and these gloves, which are really protective and also look cool, if you'll excuse me, is no small thing. I'll leave all my urban gear in the description for riding in the city with peace of mind, because you're protected but also look cool. That being said, I want to explain to you now from the saddle how to deal with a head shake. Now, maybe when you do these things, as I was explaining before, if the wheel doesn't come back into alignment, that's why it's important. And if you notice when you watch wheelie videos of those who know how to do them, they also have the handlebars that maybe during the wheelie move to the right or left, but then when they land, they straighten them, because if you were to come down from the wheelie with the wheel sideways, well, in that case, a head shake would be practically guaranteed. In addition to the factors mentioned previously, so everything concerning tires, rims, and suspension, obviously a lot also depends on your riding style. It's not good practice beyond wheelies to open the throttle excessively, because if you do it on a road with potholes, well, you're not exactly a genius. If there's a pothole and you're accelerating even without a wheelie, the weight of the bike shifts all the way back, so the front end gets light, it actually extends, and this makes the front control feel really, really light. Paradoxically, after this phenomenon, you're all leaned back like this and involuntarily pushed back by the bike. You open the throttle and the bike takes off, so the bike accelerates instantly and you make it shake even more. Another important thing to understand if the bike has its own problems, because there are some, paradoxically, do you remember the test ride of the old model Tracer 900 done in Abruzzo? I would let go of the hands and the handlebars would shake on their own, they would vibrate. In that case, there were other problems. As I told you, if a wobble happens and you're not expecting it, what you'll notice is that the bike will start doing this. Slowly you'll feel it like this. It can be, let's say, a quick wobble that corrects itself immediately. Maybe in the case of a pothole this usually happens, or maybe it can even be a bigger wobble of this type. If you've done a wheelie, or if the wheel just got a bit light for a moment and in the meantime you've given a direction to the handlebars, something like this can happen, a calmer oscillation, but wider. But the thing that happens most frequently is usually small vibrations, which are also what panics you the most, because by doing this, even now I can't steer well, even when I'm looking for it, the bike in the direction I want. Imagine if this happens at higher speeds, maybe in a corner, without you doing it on purpose. So in that case, as I told you, what should you do? Well, the first thing is to let it go. So there are many videos on YouTube of people who keep doing this for a long time, and they're right to do so. Let it go, let it do its thing. Sooner or later, the wobble will slowly subside. If you try to control it when the bike starts to wobble, so you feel it going left and you push right, if you start doing this, the wobble will only amplify, leading to a real tank slapper, which is when this grip basically hits the stop here and the tank gets slapped. In that case, guys, pray. If you're a believer, pray, because there's nothing else to be done. Another thing you can do along with letting the bike do its thing is to grip tighter, not apply force, but grip. Don't have relaxed hands like I have now, but grip the handlebars well. So even if the bike is moving, you will still be firmly on it, because if you are not, you really do risk something like this happening. Now here is the third and final tip, which we have already mentioned before and are seeing again now. When the bike starts to wobble, just keep giving it gas, keep accelerating, and it will stabilize itself much more easily. But obviously give it gas in a logical, rational way, and even in that case, the effect will be to stabilize the bike. Guys, I'm not an instructor, but I've wanted to make this video for a long time because wobbling is something that has always worried me and that I've investigated a lot. So I now have some experience precisely because the bikes I've always had have suffered from this problem. So I live with it now, and I wanted to give you some details to deal with this type of phenomenon that is always scary on a bike if you can't avoid it. Maintain your bike tires, rims, suspension, very important to prevent this problem from happening. If it should happen, as I told you, stay calm and maybe even give it a little gas, which when in doubt never hurts. That's all for this video. We'll see each other again next time.